Good evening, Julien. How is life in Paris this evening?
Good morning, Max. Life is beautiful here. I've been waiting the whole week to listen to your story, so here I am. What's up with you?
Oh, I got one, and it's a little bit haunting, a little bit painful. It wasn't something for me personal. It was for my late father-in-law, who was an engineer, very sharp man, very tech savvy, very close with a buck. And, he was the kind of guy that had his flip phone, and he would call where he had his stocks, and he knew how to put in the stock tickers, and every day he'd have a little, we'd be doing something, and all of a sudden he'd just stop and not explain what he was doing. He'd just call and check all his stocks, see how they did today. Just reasonably tech savvy, totally tech savvy, reasonably phone savvy, never got to the point of mobile apps. And computers, he could kind of get through. But he had a problem with his phone service. Like he said, he was very cost conscious about the world. So he had a prepay subscription phone, and he called, and we were over there having dinner, waiting for dinner or something like that. So I got to make this call, but he just did it right there in the den, and it was he and I sitting there, and he's on the phone going, "Hello, miss. I need to, miss, are you hearing me, miss? What's going on? I don't understand what's going on. I can't do this. What? Can you help me? Ma'am, ma'am, please stop talking. Listen to me. Help me." And, just on and on and on. And I'm like, what the hell? So he hung up and just, into absolute disgust. And I was like, that's the worst agent I've ever heard. So I'm like, let me call. I gotta get, at this point, I don't even care about solving his problem. How the hell could something like this happen? So I called, and I guess this is the point to explain. In the US, and I bet this is a global phenomenon, the lower cost carriers have two audiences: retired people who are very careful with their money because they're on a fixed income, and young people who can't afford anything yet. And this was an IVR that targeted half of that market. And it wasn't the older people who were on a fixed income. So I called, and Miss was an avatar. Her name was Simone. And Simone was hip and urban and cool and now. And she's like, "Hi, I'm Simone. I'm here to help you. What would you like today?" To which he said, "Miss, you can tell me things like," and she starts her list of the menu, and he's like, "Hello." And he never understood it was an IVR. He never understood, and it was just enough. He'd say something, she'd stop, and then she'd say, "I didn't get that. Why don't you say it again? You can say that." And there was in a million years, there was no possibility of connection. So it was, the experience was really brief. The story was really short. But I think there's a nice lesson to be had there. So I'm kind of curious what your reactions are to it.
Well, it brings me two stories. I'm not going to go through with them, but it brings me back two stories that I thought were beautiful a few years back. One of them was a customer I worked with in Belgium. They created this, I think I talked about this already in the past. They created this dedicated customer service team, mostly digital, with a little bit of phone, but with only youngsters who would speak the same language as that specific audience. So kind of what is happening here with the IVR, and that was a beautiful success. The other thing it reminds me of is when I was still a teenager, so that was a while ago, you had this offer... you had this offer where for the same thing, prepaid card that you had to recharge your phone with, and you could decide whether you wanted to spend it on the normal plan, and you would have 2 hours calling for the month. Or you would go on the advertising plan where you would have 4 hours calling, but before any call you place, you had to listen to an ad, which
I've heard of that.
as a teenager, I loved it because I really had no money, and 2 hours was definitely not long enough for a month or something like that. So what I'm getting at is, from a marketing perspective and from a customer experience perspective, having dedicated plans that talk to your audience is very smart, but when it's well done, right? Because it's not always done the right way. But understanding your audience, having the right buyer persona, talking to people the way they talk, using the channel they use, talking to them about things they care about, right? Using the same vocab, all this kind of things are incredibly important to build a bond with your customers and to build stronger relationship and build loyalty, and then you can get referral. And this is a beautiful story when done properly. The problem is it has to be done properly. And talking to someone from the first group as if it was from the second group, that obviously is going to be, that's not going to go right. So what I would say about it is beautiful idea, very poor execution, because you have to know that when you build this kind of programs dedicated to a specific group of people, if you do it properly, that's going to be a hit. But if you put anyone else within that program, because you customized it so much, that's going to be a miss, and it could backfire pretty quickly, which apparently happened there.
Yeah, I think to me, this is all know your audience. And to your point, they knew half their audience. And they knew half their audience really well, and I'll bet you they nailed it. I think it was a great experience for them. I mean, they really, at that point, if they're going, I mean, either they don't care about their older customers and they just let them, disappear, or you'd have to build a separate brand. You'd have to have a different IVR. I know enough about speech recognition apps. They spent a lot of money on that app. It was a very sophisticated natural language app. It was not a trivial endeavor in any way, shape, or form. But it ended up antagonizing half of their audience, which is just such an epic fail.
It could be, or it could be a one-off. I'm thinking, when we both work in marketing, so you've had probably this time in your career where you feel very lonely because by mistake you sent an email to your entire audience saying "Dear first name, last name," right? That happened to every marketer around the earth, where you try to segment everything, you test, and then instead of testing the preview button, I press the mass sending button.
Yeah.
And then you really feel stupid about it. And that could be this kind of thing where they built a specific IVR and you're supposed to detect the number, and based on the number, whether that is, a VIP or non-VIP, that's an elderly or youngster, that's, it could.
That's true. They may have had something there that he just slipped through a crack somehow.
And this kind of stuff happen.
You know what? That honestly makes me feel so much better about this whole story. To think it could be something as simple as that, and not they just blew off half their audience,
or it could be something where they were trying to get people of a certain age to better understand their grandchildren. That might have been the whole purpose of the program.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like good marketing. That doesn't sound. One last thought before we wrap up here. You said a couple of things you said are interesting to me. You talked about paying for the ad or getting extra time for the ads and how targeted this was. And that's also beautiful for the advertising because they know exactly, you're going to get really good, really crisp demographics, not like you do on Google or something like that, but you get very crisp demographics on who's getting these ads. So it also works well at that level.
Yes and no. I don't know if this kind of stuff still exists. I'm too old now, so I may not pay attention anymore. But I've not heard of this kind of program still. Maybe it does. But the only thing I can tell you is when you're a teenager, or at least when I was a teenager, I would find every possible way to trick the system and to make sure I was getting the credit ever listening to a single ad. So I would time them to make sure I would, remove the phone for the full 20 seconds. That was stupid. But at the end, I wasn't listening to any ad. I'm not sure they managed to brainwash me, but I get the credit for that.
Yeah. Okay. That may be true. That may be fine. And yeah, you're right. Telephone advertising is not a market that took off. So.
Yeah. Well, let's see for messaging advertising in the future. I know I'm going to hate that, but that's probably where we're heading. Do you feel any better about this? Do you feel better about your father-in-law?
This was helpful. I especially the thought that maybe he got the wrong path and there was a path for him there. I'm going to cling to that because I think that'll really heal me and make me feel better. So, as always, great to spend the time on the couch. I appreciate it and definitely help me out.
Perfect. I will talk to you next week again then, Max. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Julien. Bye.